In a land where loyalty was a myth and betrayal was currency, a child was handed over as a pawn. He had no army, no allies, only silence and eyes that never blinked. But in 50 years he would rule all of Japan. The Sengoku period, Japan's warring states era, wasn't about heroism, it was about survival. Between the clashing steel of warlords and the crack of newly imported muskets, one name would rise from obscurity to absolute power: Tokugawa Ieyasu. This isn't the sanitized tale of a noble leader. This is the raw, untamed story of how a young hostage became Japan's most cunning strategist, and how he built a dynasty not through brute strength but ruthless calculation. Ieyasu was born in 1543, the same year European firearms arrived in Japan. His name was not yet Ieyasu. He was Matsudaira Takechiyo, heir to a mid-tier daimyo. But power shifts fast when betrayal is bought in gold. At age 5, his father traded him to the Imagawa clan for military aid. Before the deal could close, he was kidnapped by the rival Oda clan. Now imagine this visually. A child sits in a cold stone room, not a prisoner by chains, but by destiny. He wasn't beaten. He wasn't tortured. They didn't need to, because what the warlords needed was obedience. By the time he returned to his home province at age 9, his father was already dead, murdered by betrayal. No kingdom, no protection, just the cold reality of feudal life. But Ieyasu learned early power didn't come from titles, it came from movement. He married young to a woman from a rival clan, then reclaimed his ancestral seat by force. And for the first time at 15, he wore armor not as a hostage but as a commander. In 1560, Ieyasu's overlord Imagawa Yoshimoto planned to seize Kyoto. Ieyasu laid siege to a fortress using European muskets for the first time. It was brutal, effective, and utterly untraditional. But just as they celebrated victory, Oda Nobunaga struck. The Imagawa leader was killed in a surprise ambush and the clan fell apart. Now Ieyasu was free, unclaimed, unbound, and he made the first of many controversial decisions. He allied with his old kidnapper, Oda Nobunaga. At 5 years old, he was ripped from his family not by fate but by a deal. Tokugawa Ieyasu, then known as Takechiyo, was sent as a hostage in exchange for military aid. But before the handoff was complete, he was kidnapped by a rival clan and hidden behind cold castle walls. No blades, no beatings, just silence and eyes always watching. In this cold cell, a child learned his first lesson. Survival doesn't begin with strength, it begins with silence. He wasn't the only one raised behind walls. In a rare moment of political theater, Takechiyo was brought before a brash teenage noble, Oda Nobunaga. One boy calculating, the other chaotic. Neither knew they would one day decide the fate of Japan. This meeting planted a seed not of friendship but of future fire. Back home, Ieyasu's father was betrayed by his own men, bribed by gold. When the news reached the boy, there were no tears left. The only legacy left to him was ashes and enemies. In a world ruled by ambition, loyalty was the first to die. Years passed. He returned not as a child, but as a quiet observer. Okazaki Castle, his ancestral home, stood, but its spirit was broken. He walked its corridors like a ghost, claiming what was once his. Castles can be rebuilt, but trust never. At just 15, he was no longer a boy. Donning armor for the first time, Ieyasu led warriors older than him into battle. They doubted him. He didn't care. He didn't win by yelling orders. He won because he stood where arrows fell. To survive in Sengoku Japan, swords weren't enough. So Ieyasu married Lady Tsukiyama, a noblewoman tied to the Imagawa clan. It wasn't love, it was chess. A wedding where every smile hid suspicion. In 1567 he cast off the Matsudaira name. He claimed descent from the Minamoto ancient warriors and emperors. With a new name, Tokugawa, he rewrote his bloodline. It wasn't true. But in politics, truth is optional. Names don't define legacy, deeds do. In 1558, a teenage Ieyasu laid siege to a fortress. But this wasn't traditional swordplay, it was the new war. He used European muskets, loud, brutal, terrifying. The enemy never saw it coming. That day, the old Japan cracked, and Ieyasu was the one holding the gun. In 1560, Oda Nobunaga launched a stunning ambush at Okahazama. Imagawa Yoshimoto, Ieyasu's overlord, was slain. Suddenly, Ieyasu had no master, no shield, and Nobunaga was now the most dangerous man in Japan. In chaos, some drown, others swim silently to shore. Ieyasu's wife and son were held hostage by the remnants of the Imagawa. To free them, he didn't charge in with swords. He sent Hattori Hanzo, the shadow among shadows. At night they struck with silence and fire. War isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears tabby shoes. They were monks, ronin, farmers. The Iko-Iki rose in defiance of samurai rule, and they gained support even from Ieyasu's own retainers. He marched, he fought, he bled. When arrows failed, he went himself into the fire, into the bullets. At first he allied with Takeda Shingen, the Tiger of Kai. Then he switched sides. In Sengoku Japan, betrayal was not shameful, it was strategy. You don't get remembered for keeping promises. You get remembered for winning. The battle went wrong. Ieyasu's army collapsed under Takeda's cavalry. Retreating to his castle, he considered death. Then he laughed. He ordered his own funeral to be staged. Sometimes the only move left is to convince the world you're already dead. 1600, Sekigahara. All of Japan held its breath. Ieyasu's army faced off against the Toyotomi loyalists. Betrayals on the battlefield flipped the tide. Ieyasu crushed them. One battle decided a nation's fate, and he walked away with it in his palm. In 1603, he was crowned shogun. At 60 years old, the boy born as a hostage now ruled Japan. He would go on to build the longest-lasting peace the nation had ever seen, not by kindness but by crushing the chaos into silence.